Smith & Wesson Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3 semi-automatics. Let's check them out. Smith & Wesson introduced their Model 39 in 1954, and it was a double single-action semi-automatic pistol in 9mm, really designed for the U.S. military. But in 1971, they made the Model 59, and this is a double-stacked, double single-action semi-automatic pistol. And this really put semi-automatics on the market, especially toward law enforcement, who are used to revolvers. But in 1979, they introduced their 659. And this is an all stainless steel double single action pistol, and it was an upgrade over the original Model 59. And then in 1988 they introduced the Gen 3 Model 5906. These are all similar handguns, and yet there are some differences. A lot of times you can still find these on the used market, but this really changed the face of law enforcement and really led them to carrying semi-automatics over revolvers. So we're going to do a comparison, look at some of the differences. There are a ton of different models and variations in this line, but we're going to be focusing on the full-size double-stack models. And guys, these are still very viable self-defense options. I know we have the striker fire polymer frame pistols that are the rage, and they're great guns. But if you have one of these old Smith & Wessons, these have a lot of soul. Smith & Wesson has always been known for their really high quality revolvers and of course really trusted by law enforcement for decades. We're going to look at the Gen 1, which is the Model 59, the 659, which is a Gen 2, and then the Gen 3, which is a 5906. There are a lot of variations in between these, but we're going to kind of focus on these. We're going to show you a couple of different models. Of course, Smith & Wesson now is known for their MMP 2.0 series. And it's been really proven they make really great pistols. But it's really funny, a lot of people really rave about these handguns and Smith & Wesson bringing them back into the market. The one big problem is that these would be very expensive to reproduce. And the great thing is there's a lot of police trade-ins, there are a lot of guns on the used market to where you can pick up a nice Gen 1, Gen 2, or Gen 3 Smith & Wesson for a reasonable amount of money. Now we're going to start out with the Model 59, and then we're just going to show the differences between the three different generations. First off, this carried a 14-round magazine, and that was the standard. And then we have an empty chamber, so the gun is empty. First off, we have a magazine disconnect. So you have to reinsert your magazine for the gun to fire, and that includes all three models. We have a decocker, so we can just bring that down and now it's on safe and bring it back up for fire. And these handguns were made for over 11 years, from 71 to 1982, and very popular. It did come with the blue steel slide and an aluminum alloy frame. There were some prototypes for stainless steel that were made for the U.S. Navy SEALs, but it was just never adopted. But this is really the backbone of Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3. And to be honest with you, there's some definite changes between these three pistols. But again, the magazines interchange. So a lot of the different features and the way they shoot is very similar. Now it has the wood grips. There is a section right here that is the back strap that is removable. And then of course we have our standard frame. It had the rounded off trigger guard, and of course the decocker is not ambidextrous, but they begin to produce ambidextrous models later on. Real nice cocking serrations. The sight Front sight was milled into the slide. Here at the rear sight, which this is actually an adjustable sight, and you can see the different configuration. They did flatten out the top of the slide, and that's on all the models. The barrel's 4 inches. It does have the barrel bushing type system, and then you have your recoil spring, and this is reminiscent of your 1911. But one of the things about the parts on these guns is they are machined. The hammer, the trigger, a lot of the different parts, and so this made this a very sturdy handgun. And of course, with the aluminum frame, it made it fairly lightweight, but it's still actually a pretty full-size handgun. And this one does have a lanyard loop. It has a nice curvature right here with the beaver tail just to keep from slide bite. And the Gen 1 handguns are in just the 2 digits. So whether it's the 39, which is the single stack, or the 59, here with the double stack. One thing you will notice though is that the frame actually is beefed up in this area right here, and that was to accommodate the double stack magazines. So they actually thickened up the grip all the way up to this area just to be able to allow for the double stack magazines. So the top half is pretty much a Model 39. Taking the Model 59 out to the range has a very smooth trigger. The frame to slide fit is very well done. We'll look at that when we break these down, but it gives you a lot of extra rail. As far as the texturing, I mean, it has serrations on the front and back. It's not a lot, but honestly, I mean, it felt really good in my hand when I was shooting it. I didn't feel like it was slipping. The beaver tail makes you just get your hand up there where it is close to the slide. The sights are pretty plain, but actually I was able to get on target very well. But overall, these are a lot of fun just to take out to the range and to shoot. Then the Gen 2s actually entered the market in 1979. Which was actually 3 years before the Gen 1s ceased production. Next we have the Model 659. The 6 designates stainless steel. 4 designates a blued version. This is the Gen 2 with the 3 numbers. And this in particular was a very popular gun with law enforcement. It is an all steel frame and it's all stainless steel. They did make the Model 459. This actually has an aluminum frame with a blued slide, which is kind of a matte finish. And this was also very popular with law enforcement because it was lighter weight. And this is a Gen 2 as well. This also has a 4-inch barrel. We're going to go ahead and drop our magazine. They moved up to 15-round mag capacity. And then we're going to check to make sure the gun's unloaded. And of course, we have our decocker, and it's ambidextrous, which is an add-on from the Model 59, which had it only on one side. Still has the magazine disconnect, which is required for a lot of law enforcement agencies. We have pretty much of a straight grip at the back, and then it comes up to a beaver tail. So that keeps it from slide bite. It gives you a nice high ride grip on it. Not a super low bore axis, but definitely a great shooting handgun. One of the things also is this kind of iconic rear sight that has the wings on the side. But this is an adjustable sight and it does protect it. The front sight is just a milled sight into the slide. The workmanship and the craftsmanship are excellent. I mean, these are beautiful guns. The side flats on the slide are polished, and then we have matte finish all along the top. And we have the slide with a flattened out surface on the top. These are, again, same as the Model 59, but there are some differences. One that's kind of unique is the frame itself comes out farther, the beefed up area, than the Model 59, which seems to be a little bit recessed to about here before the slide stop. And this extends well past the slide stop. You have your magazine release here. It is not switchable to the other side. And we have polycarbonate grips, which I believe they did offer some models with the wood grips. You have an aluminum back strap, which covers your mainspring housing. One thing that was kind of unique is we have our decockers, and they're ambidextrous, but it has a Phillips head screw through the right side of the decocker. And at first, I thought that that was something that someone else had done. But when I've looked at other Gen 2 models, they had that same decocker configuration. Of course, you have your external extractor. We have nice cocking serrations, but one of the things about the decocker is that it actually aids in bringing that slide back. Also, one thing that's really nice about these handguns is the slide to frame fit. Because of the extended slides, it just gives you a smoother action. The hammer is a machine part. It is not memmed. Also, the trigger and a lot of the parts are just very well made. And so this gun, while again, this is on the used market or police trade-ins, these guns would be very expensive to reproduce. This does have the barrel bushing system as well. Again, very similar to your 1911. The barrel is a straight walled barrel. And so when we bring it back, it's just a straight barrel like your 1911s. But while it's heavy, it shoots really well. The weight of the pistol really just mitigates the recoil. So it makes it a real pleasure to take out to the range. When it comes to the texturing on the grip, it's not super aggressive, but yet I never felt like there was any shift or anything in my hand while I was firing. But it has a very smooth action, and again, because of that slide to frame fit, the trigger being very nice, I mean, this was a pleasure to take out to the range. And then entered the Gen 3. This was in 1989 to 1999. And for 10 years, these were definitely a favorite with law enforcement. All stainless steel pistol. This is a hefty gun. To be honest, I really feel like it's a little bit lighter than the 659. But you have your 4-letter designations that make this a Gen 3. One thing that they changed up front was this mono grip. It's a one-piece grip that fits around the entire back. So they did away with the aluminum strap on the back. But they made it really thin, so this makes it even a little more easy to grip hold of, especially if you have medium or smaller hands. They retained the extension on the frame as well. Going to drop our magazine, again, a 15-round magazine, and Metgar mags, guys, they're less expensive, and it's great to see an OEM company making mags still for these old classics. And of course, the gun is unloaded. And we do have the standard decocker. Another thing that's really different is they went away from the barrel bushing system. Also, they changed the barrel dimensions, and so we have this bulb area or convex area in the barrel, which you see on a number of different guns, especially double single action pistols. But that just changed a little bit of the configuration of this handgun. Also, you'll notice the hammer. It's a MEM part. This is not a machine part. Also, the trigger as well. It has your Novak style sights in the back, and it has a dovetail sight at the front, so you can switch that out. And actually the top of the slide, while it's flat, it's a little more surface cut away than on the 659. Again, a 4-inch barrel and an all steel pistol. They also did away with the lanyard loop at the bottom, which they still retained with the model 659. But as you can see, the grips are definitely different, and again, we have that barrel bushing design on the model 59 and the 659. I believe the Gen 3s also had versions that did have a squared trigger guard. Have a little bevel in the mag well to let those mags go in really smooth. And while the 659 has that Phillips head screw, they redesigned the other side of the decocker, and it's more of a pin size and, you know, just a more pleasing look to it. Now, while the 4-digit model number made this a Gen 3, there were anomalies, and this is the model 915. It's actually a Gen 3, but it has an aluminum frame. It doesn't have an ambidextrous decocker. There are some other things that make this a less expensive handgun to produce. And so this was actually designated in their value line. So it really allowed for law enforcement to have a less expensive option, but also a lighter weight option. Now you will notice also on the frame, where the frame cut is right here, where it's thickened. Here it just carries on all the way to the end of the dust cover. And that was probably just to save cost. So while the 5906 was really the flagship of the Smith & Wesson Gen 3 series, they did make the model 5903, which was an aluminum frame version of the 5906. In fact, everything pretty much about this is the same except for the frame material. And it's lightweight, and this is a pleasure to shoot as well. And there were a number of compact models as well. This is the 6906. It does have an aluminum frame, stainless steel slide, and they did make a number of different models in blue and a lot of others, even the Lady Smith, and I believe it was a single stack magazine pistol. Very small, easy to carry, and this would have been more for detectives. This does have the bobbed hammer, but again, there was a number of different models that Smith & Wesson produced. Even an abbreviated beaver tail, and the base plate has a finger groove on it just to give you a little better grip on the handgun. And later on in the Gen 3 series, they started adding accessory rails. This is the 4006 TSW. It is their tactical model. This was actually issued to the California Highway Patrol. but it's a 40 caliber tactical on the slide. And again, this was added. Some of the early models, it was actually bolted on, but this one is machined into the frame. And it is an all steel handgun. But the features are pretty much the same other than the rail for the 5906. Taking this out to the range, being an all steel firearm, it is a real pleasure to shoot. Again, you're getting the 15+1, you have the 4-inch barrel. The sights, the Novak sights are nice. You have that 3-dot, which makes it very visible. And of course, there were other sight options, and still are, that you can change these sights out. So one of the things about the 5906 with that dovetailed front, it gives you the option to be able to change out your sights. As far as quality goes, it really surprised me with the Gen 2 and a lot of the machine parts. This had to be very expensive to produce compared to the model 5906. So while the 5906 is a fantastic gun, I think as far as quality wise, the model 659 beats it. Now the trigger pull action's definitely different between these two. And we're going to take a look first at the model 659. And so in double action, you feel some of the linkages, they click a little bit right before you get to the break. It's not bad, but it's not super smooth. And then we're going to check reset. Reset's pretty quick, but it's not that tactile. You have to really be careful to make sure that you're hitting the reset. And then single action on the 659. Have a little bit of take up. Not a super crisp break, but not too bad. As far as the 5906, a very smooth trigger pull all the way through. With reset, right there. It is a very quick reset. Single action, not super crisp, a little bit mushy, but not too bad. We'll check the trigger pull weight with our Lyman trigger gauge on this 659. Double action is heavy, 10 pounds, 12 ounces. Single action, 4 pounds, 15.9 ounces. The model 5906, 8 pounds, 8.8 ounces. That is considerably lighter. 4 pounds, 11.6 ounces. Getting up there close to the 5-pound range. Pulling the trigger side by side, the model 659 is definitely a much heavier trigger pull. Weight on the model 59, 31.25 ounces. Weight on the model 659, 39.49 ounces. Weight on the model 5906, 36.44 ounces. The model 659 is the heaviest of the bunch. Now for disassembly, we're going to drop our magazine, make sure the gun is empty. Now you want to bring back your slide to this notch where it mates up to the end of your slide stop, just like this. Here on the other side you have your lever and your takedown lever. You can push that in and then pull this right out. Now we're going to let this go forward, but one of the problems is once that decocker is disengaged, this hammer is going to go forward. So I'm going to kind of hold on to my hammer and go ahead and pull this off and then let my hammer down. Because of the magazine disconnect, it's very difficult to disassemble with the magazine inserted. Now we're going to take off our recoil spring and guide rod. It is a full-length steel guide rod. And then we're going to pull our barrel down and we're just going to pull it out. Now one difference is disassembling the Gen 2, you do have the bushing system. So we're going to go ahead and pull our recoil spring and guide rod out. And then we're going to turn our barrel bushing to this side, and that way we can bring it straight out. Again, very similar to your 1911. It doesn't have the plug though. So now we're going to go ahead and lift up and just pull our barrel right out. And it is that straight walled barrel. And we have all three guns disassembled. Again, they all disassemble the same, and we're going to look at some comparisons. Now here we have the Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3 barrel systems. There are some differences between the Gen 1 and 2 and the 2 and 3. Really the only difference I've found with the Gen 1 and 2 is that this band at the back of the barrel, it starts here but it ends. They don't finish milling this area out. Whereas on the Gen 2 it's milled out all the way around. Otherwise everything looks very close to the same. When it comes to the Gen 2 and Gen 3, again you have this area right here that dips down with the barrel. And with the Gen 2, it does not, it's the straight walled, but it does go all the way around and it relieves that area underneath the barrel, just like on the Gen 2. Right here though, the barrel hood, right at the top, this is a little bit thicker on the Gen 2, it's a little bit thinner on the Gen 3. But as far as perceivable appearances, everything looks really close between both. As far as the takedown levers, the only difference I see is with the Gen 3, it's been shaved off here to make this a little thinner. The Gen 1 and 2 are identical. As far as the interior of the slides, they pretty much look very close to the same. There may be a few tweaks here and there, but they're pretty much the same design. And as far as the frames go, they all look pretty identical. There may be a few changes. There's definitely some mem parts or some stamped metal right here or near the takedown lever. But overall, they're really pretty close to the same and definitely the same design. As far as reassembly, just put your barrel in. Go ahead and put your recoil spring and guide rod. It sits on this little notch and it's not very big right here, so you just want to make sure it's set and that it's level. Next, we're going to take our slide. Now this is where it gets a little tricky, and it's the same with all three. It's when you're bringing your slide over, you have these levers that get in the way. So first you want to take one and push it down, but then you'll go to the next lever, and so you push it down. Now this third lever is where the decocker is, so you need to be very careful that you don't drop the hammer. So I'm going to go ahead and press this lever and drop my hammer, just like that. So now I can go back to those three levers. This last lever, just push it down, and that should allow the slide to go over it. Now you can actually bring this back and line up for your slide stop. It's a little tricky getting those levers just right. Of course, we're going to reinsert our magazine so we can drop the hammer, and we're back in business. And the others do the same thing. Now with the Gen 2, go ahead and put your barrel in, and the only difference is you need to go ahead and put in your barrel bushing. So we're going to set it in here, and then we're going to bring in our recoil spring and guide rod. We're going to straighten up that bushing to make sure it's in line, just like this. And guys, right here is the little edge. It's a little more difficult to retain this guide rod. So as we bring it down, if you don't get it right on it, it will spring across the room. And then, just like with the Gen 3, reattach it to your frame. Well guys, on the used market, you can typically find these between $450, $500, give or take. Of course, condition will be part of that. There are times where there are police trade-ins that show up at some of the big distributors, and sometimes you can get these for very reasonable prices. And that's one way that I bought a number of these. And there's a ton of parts out there for these handguns. And so that way, if you do have any kind of problems, typically you can find the parts to fix it. And because these were in production for so long, there's still a lot of holsters. Of course, obviously magazines with MetGuard magazines, and there's quite a bit. Now, as far as pros and cons, you know, they're heavy, they're big, they're bulky, but man, they shoot like a dream. And of course, obviously with the aluminum frames, you're going to get less weight. These guns are still very viable self-defense options, especially for home defense. It's going to allow you to really mitigate your recoil. These are great to take out to the range. And honestly, to reproduce this would cost at least double, if not more. So buying these on the used market is really a good deal. Guys, I'll give you a fair warning, they can be addictive. As you can see, I'm kind of out of control. So guys, again, there's a number of these still out on the market, and they typically sell for fairly reasonable prices. They're solid firearms, they're double single action, they have a full round capacity, and they're just excellent shooting handguns. And of course, they're Smith Wesson quality. I mean, they're great to collect, but also they still make a viable self-defense option. A little old school, but they'll get the job done. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic. The Smith & Wesson, the Smith & Wesson. Double single action, semi-automatic. And this is the Model 59, is it? Yeah. Then the Model 59. Oops. And this is the Glock, and this is, okay, predecessor of the Model 7047. Yeah, that too. There are some pretty significant, things that are like over here and somewhere over there.